Hi Sameema,
Hey Hora.
welcome back for the episode 9 of our series on philosophy, the intersection of philosophy and psychotherapy and counseling. And I guess we will have a very interesting discussion today.
This has been brewing for a while.
Yes, actually, yes. And I was thinking about it's an amazing chance for us to deliver not only what we know and we are very good at it, but sometimes we need to read a lot on that, and I guess that was one of those.
We both had to do a lot of reading.
Titles that we needed actually to read different materials, and I think, and from my side, it was very interdisciplinary. Because I realized that how the whole idea of what we're gonna discuss today affects the neurobiology today. I wanted to find a kind of language to connect both of them. And so it was a good practice of reading from different materials. But you want to
introduce?
Start and introduce our discussion.
So we are going to visit a particular 17th century philosopher, Dutch philosopher, Baruch Spinoza. And he is a very, very interesting figure in his personal life as well. And we might visit some of the details there. But in terms of his philosophy, he is sort of a contemporary of Descartes, whom we discussed in our first episode. However, and he's talking in a very similar language, similar kind of ideas, but the overall philosophy is also significantly different. And I think it's also a parallel. So we discussed how Descartes' ideas still impact us, our language, the way we talk about health, mental health, physical health, the whole Cartesian dualism of mind and body is still so much part of our language. Yet at the same time, Spinoza, quite often people are not aware of it, but his ideas are very relevant, it's a re-emergence of Spinoza studies in philosophy circle. But when we went down this rabbit hole for this particular episode, there's also a lot of work that is being done in the neurobiology, the brain sciences, and the theories of emotions that are heavily impacted by Spinoza. And when you read his work, you would see how ahead of his time he was, or maybe not so much, but rather we kind of give too much credit to ourselves now, and we think that we have come up with all of these ideas. But this kind of exploration also helps us see how much of these ideas were already there. They had a different language. They had a very different, because they didn't have the tools that we have today to actually say the things, differentiate between what's happening in the neurobiology, what's happening, in your body as such. But they were talking about the same stuff. And that was a very, very, mind-boggling moment for us.
And I think there are lots of interesting studies in terms of trying to understand how Freud affected by Spinoza, because he was definitely actually read Spinoza, and that book that I was reading on it, The Clinical Spinoza, is just, it's all about they're trying to figure out what are the roots of consciousness, unconscious, all of them. It's really rooted in Spinoza's idea of
and it
body.
Makes sense.
And it's really interesting that how we normally forget the historicity of the philosopher and
it's
the
so
theories,
important. Exactly.
As you said, Spinoza was 17th century, such as Descartes and such as Hobbes, and there is an air, they all breathe. So there were certain concerns that really affect them all. But you see that how differently it is manifested within different people, and why? Because they were unique people with different backgrounds, history. So I think we should not really lose the sight of the historicity of the philosopher or the theorists that we are engaging in. So, do you want to start with how, if Spinoza and Descartes and even Hobbes, they were almost at the same time and they're contemporaries. So, why, and they were actually specifically Descartes and Spinoza were interested in the idea of mind and body, then how different they were. I mean, why we have Spinoza's understanding of mind and body and Descartes' understanding of mind and body. So you mentioned that you want to start with the idea of metaphysics, the way that we have started all the podcast.
So if a long time ago when we recorded our first episode, if our viewers, our listeners remember that we talked about that metaphysics is not just a concern of philosophers. Each and every individual has a metaphysics of their own, and it is your metaphysics that informs or builds your ethics, that builds your everyday life, and ultimately that has a huge impact in the way you understand your inner life, your emotions, your connection to other human beings. And in case of philosophers, in order to understand their ideas about emotions, their ideas about ethics, politics, you always need to go back to their metaphysics, whether they have developed one or whether they have just borrowed from someone else. You need to go there. And although our focus today is going to be Spinoza's theory of conatus, striving, and how he connects it or how it informs his idea of passions, what we today call emotions, but Descartes and Spinoza, when they're referring to it, they're using the word passions. So we just giving it a bit of a historical detail, but for all purposes of our discussion, it should be read as emotions, what we call emotions today. So that's going to be our focus. But to understand his conatus, we need to first understand his metaphysics. Which is very different from Descartes. So with Descartes, we remember that a clear split between two kinds of substances, and that by substance we mean reality, two kind of things in the world. There are either matter, material things, what he calls bodies, or mental things, what we call like basically consciousness. So he finds that they don't have any similarity between them.
Somehow they are related.
In myself, I see this mental aspect and this physical aspect. They don't share any property, so they must be two that combine. They form a unity in a human being. They interact, they impact each other, and when I die, they split and they become part of different worlds. And like you can think about all religious ideas or whatever, but at least for the sake of understanding our life, as long as we are a living human being, they are combined, they form a unity, but they are two separate things and sort of have a separate life and separate kind of qualities. With Spinoza, we enter a very different world. He would say that yes, there's a difference between what you call mental and there's a difference between what you call physical, but they are not two things. There's only one reality. And I mean, he even kind of comes down to the idea, so for Descartes, you have mental reality and physical reality, and you also have God. So he created three kind of things because he was too afraid to be in Galileo's shoes, house arrest or whatever it is. Or maybe, some would say that no, God's separation is very important for his epistemology. We are not discussing philosophy here, full blown. But whatever be the reason, Descartes kept God as a separate reality. Spinoza just merges everything in one. There's only one reality. You can call it God, you can call it nature, you can call it whatever, absolute. There's just one reality, and it has many qualities, or what the term he uses is attributes. And mind and body are two attributes of the same reality. And that's it. So we are one reality, we are one thing, and we have two qualities, two attributes, mind and body. Or mental or physical.
So for Spinoza, that the one and only substance that is real is nature or God. He actually interchangeably using these two words. But we need to pay attention that Spinoza's idea of God doesn't have any sacrecy, so it doesn't.
Yeah.
It's not sacred at all. Even
Exactly.
when he talks about nature, that nature is not sacred.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
everything is what it is,
Exactly.
and it is what actually whatever it is in the world is a finite mode of that infinite reality.
Yeah.
Power, which is God or nature, the very essence of God or nature, he calls it power.
Mm-hmm.
So the essence of that nature, the essence of God, is power.
Yeah.
And if everything within the world, the whole world, existence, whatever it's existing, is infinite attribute, finite attribute of that infinity,
Yeah.
means that everything in the world has a parcel of that power.
Yeah.
So finite parcel of that power
Yeah.
is the essence of everything in this world.
Yeah. Yeah. You can, for example, I mean, sometimes people find these ideas very confusing, very difficult to understand, but you can imagine that, you know, all the light you see in the world is coming from the sun.
Yeah.
You see parts of it, trapped inside this room, but it's not like a separate part, something. So it has a finite, a limited capacity compared to what the sun is. I mean, sun again is finite in that understanding.
I think the light or the array of the light.
Yeah. But so when we are thinking of God, nature, reality, and us and everything else is finite expressions of it, it doesn't mean that, you know, it's a raw material and we are getting things out of it. We are still part of it. It's not like, you know, there's clay and you're making things out from a huge pile and the pile is becoming reduced. No, we are still part of that reality. We are finite expressions of that reality. And it's so important to remember that since we are finite expressions of that reality, we share qualities.
Exactly.
With that reality, and that also means we share quality with everything in
the
nature.
World. Yes.
So we are unique in some way, but we are not totally unique. The way Descartes wants us to be, like, mind is totally unique. It doesn't. So, like, of course, my body shares properties with this shelf, this desk, whatever else is around there, following laws of physics, but my mind is totally free. It is not limited. Spinoza would say, no, that's not real. That's not the reality. I am totally an expression of this infinite reality. And so I actually show some of his attributes.
But the finite ones.
Finite ones.
Finite modes of, I'm showing finite modes of that infinite reality, that infinite power. I have the qualities, but again, I'm demonstrating it in a definite and finite. It's really interesting because that's why the freedom for Spinoza is a very different concept. We are not free as indeterminate. No, we are determined.
Exactly.
We are determined in our capacities to do things.
Yeah.
But do we know what are all of the capacities? No, we don't know all of them. So in that sense, we have definitely kind of understanding of, yes, everything in the world affecting us and we affect everything else in the world, because we all share certain qualities of that very infinite power. But at the same time, we don't know how many interactions and how many kind of affections are really imaginable in this dynamics. So in that term, we are determined. We are not free. The way that...
Which is a huge different kind of way of looking at reality compared to Descartes. Because for Descartes, our will, our intellect is totally free. It has unlimited freedom. Body doesn't. My body is totally limited by laws of physics, laws of nature. It's just like as material as anything else, but my mind is totally free. And because one is totally determined, one is totally free, as a combined human being, I have limited freedom. I have freedom, but limited freedom.
Yeah.
So like I can't fly.
Yeah.
Because my body is limited
Yeah.
by the laws of physics.
Yeah.
My will would like to try to fly, but my body cannot. So that's where
for Spinoza, that will is not there.
Exactly. There's
that willing of indefinite willing. It's not there.
Yeah. I am my mind, my thinking. It's also impacted by what's happening around me. The same way my material body is impacted, and because for him, these are not two things. I am only one thing. I am a finite expression of this infinite reality. And I can notice two attributes, two ways of, understanding myself, two ways of perceiving myself. One is I can look at the physical side of me. And the other is I also have this awareness, this intellectual, this internal conscious element of me. And they are the expression of the same reality.
Yeah.
Any event you can imagine, pain, you feel it in your body, you can understand it in terms of, the nerve reaction, what is happening in the brain, but you also understand this subjective, qualitative experience, what I go through, but it's the same experience. They're not two things.
Yeah.
It's the two ways of expressing the same event.
Yeah, I think, and Stephen Nadal talks about what are these attributes. These attributes are ways of being in the world. So I have the bodily way of being in the world, and I have a mind way of being in the world, which is the thought. The thoughts are part of or a mode or attribute of me being in the world when I'm thinking. It's one way of being in the world when I'm thinking. And when I'm experiencing something totally physically, bodily, it's another way of being in the world. But I am just one.
Yeah. And it's also like, it's each and every event probably would have both. Like, there are certain elements, so like you cannot imagine any element that can be, so like even for example, when you're thinking, like very rational thoughts and ideas, or like this conversation.
Doing mathematical problem solving, for example.
Yeah, or even like let's look at this conversation. It seems like a very intellectual activity, but my lips are moving, my tongue is moving in a certain way, my body knows, my hands are moving. I have this kind of like all the bodily activities are supporting this mental activity. If my heart stops for even a second, so all of these things. So even when you're solving a problem, you are thinking about something, your eyes, your brain, everything is actually going through something, while also your brain, the ideas, the thoughts are also there at that same time. So in some moments we feel that the physical side is way more stronger. So for example, if I'm eating something, the whole experience of the tongue, the senses, the body, everything feels too physical, but the enjoyment, the pleasure, that's within your mental side, the qualia that you have there. And so every event has these two aspects. In some ways we are more focused on the internal mental aspect. In some, we are more focused on the physical aspect, but it's not like, some events are purely mental, some are purely physical. No, we have so kind of like it's parallel for Spinoza. He calls it parallelism, that, mental and physical are running parallel to each other, because they are not two. There's one and the same thing.
And when we were talking about this bits and parcels of power in every bits of creation and everything, and it's really interesting for Spinoza. It's everything is just the objects, the things, the living things. So it's a natural thing. Even the stone, even the rock, things, water, everything in the world as what that demonstrate actually the finite way of that nature, which was infinite. Has this parcel of power, so they have that power, and this is what Spinoza called conatus. That parcel of power in everything is conatus. That is a striving, that is moving, tendency, endeavor. So it's just motivation of moving, and striving for maintenance and even increasing oneself. So everything in the world has this power and conatus
Yeah.
toward preservation and extension.
Yeah.
And increasing.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, I think it's the 17th century philosophy thing that comes down to, so they want to reduce everything, and which is very like, going back to the model of geometry and mathematics, bringing back everything down to one or two axioms and explaining everything through that. That we see in Descartes as well, clear and distinct idea that kind of becomes the foundation. But with, so Spinoza, what he's trying to do here is that if there's only one reality, there should be one law. One law that, of course, there are lots of laws of physics, he wouldn't deny that. But what we are trying to get at the root of it is that there's one principle that guides everything that is happening in nature, and the rest of the laws follow that original principle, and that's it. So one law that can be found anywhere in nature is something that they talk about as conatus. With Descartes, conatus is there, but I think he has a different version. I think it does work for the material things. Mind is free. With Hobbes, everything is material only, so it's a very different story. But here we are talking about Spinoza, and the literal meaning of conatus is striving. That's it. But what it is striving for its own existence. Everything in nature is striving for the preservation of its existence, of its being. And that kind of forms the...
That is the only law of, existence.
Exactly.
Really.
So, it does express itself in different forms, in different things. So everything wants to preserve its state of being and increase whatever is going to preserve its state of being and get away from whatever is going to harm its state of being. So that's the whole principle. So for example, if we are looking at a rock, the rock's conatus is basically preserving whatever it is. It's not like the rock wants to become a boulder. That's not the idea. It's not that the horse wants to become a human. It's not like an evolutionary idea, but rather your own well-being, your own, and it is going to be very different from thing to thing, from being to being. What is their conatus? And so the conatus of a horse is very different from the conatus of a human being. So we are not trying to become superhuman. It doesn't mean that we are on an evolutionary path. What conatus does say is that I want to preserve my being.
And I think that's why Spinoza introduces this model of human nature. So because everything has a nature. That horse has this horseness is a nature. It's a model of horse nature.
Exactly.
So and it's very different from Platonic.
It's not an idea.
It's not an idea of horse. It's something which makes you. It's a conatus that preserves you the way that you are. You cannot move the you cannot change the essence. In that sense. So what is that in model of human nature? This model of human nature. So in this model, human is a conatus and a determinate, finite parcel of nature's infinite power. To do what? To preserves, maintain, and increases itself. Increases itself. Normally, for example, probably the rock doesn't have that increasing material. It's the maintenance, preserve itself. The basic idea of striving and conatus and that power is the preservation. You want to stay alive. So it's very interesting that in this idea, if conatus is the only law of nature, this means that nothing will disappear. There is no death.
Exactly. Everything is just preserving itself.
It's just preserving itself. It's really interesting. And so this will to preserve, it's the only will of the nature.
Exactly.
To stay alive and to resist.
Exactly.
In existence. So it's just really, there is no will to die.
Exactly.
There is no tendency to die. So
this is what drives everything.
Exactly. This is the power of motion. This is the engine of the world.
Exactly.
The whole world.
And it's so simple yet at the same time so elegant. So like, when a predatory animal hunts another animal, it's not because it has any other intention, but rather it knows that by hunting and eating, it's preserving its being. It's nothing against the other species. The species who runs away from that predatory animal is it's a bad thing. It's preservation of my species, my own being, but my species as well. So creating offspring. So like all of those things, so my preservation is not just my bodily preservation, but my species preservation as well. So like the whole idea of reproduction, that's why it's inbuilt in there. So when we think of Conatus, it's such a sophisticated, yet at the same time such a simple principle that does talk about, of course, it is the unifying principle, but that doesn't mean that everything lives in harmony. Because the whole idea is that everything is trying to preserve its own Conatus, its own being, its own existence. And when we say being, existence, we are not at all talking about any ideal level, any evolution, any well-being as such. It's just being. Being and well-being are not different.
Exactly.
My being is my well-being.
Exactly. And well-being is this strive. What actually Spinoza is trying to say is just, if you're supposed to stay alive and preserve yourself and actually extend yourself, so it's just more than preservation. It's not just breathing and it's not a zombie. You don't want to stay in a zombie phase.
Exactly.
No, you want to strive for perfection. And this although he has a very different idea of perfection here, because we don't have an imperfection, and perfection is just this growing. It's the sense of growing and increasing in sense of self, in sense of being. This is what is well-being. So any change of direction of this Conatus is not well-being. So as long as you are on a path of increasing and improving, you're having a well-being.
And I think where I would differ a little bit in my reading is that this extension, and I think maybe we're not differing, but I would put it a little bit differently, is not actually like, in a way increase as such. So for example, when you look at human development, like a child, when you are a baby, you have different needs, your body has different kind of structure, emotional connectivity point of view. There are different kind of ways in which a baby is living in the world. When you're a toddler, you want some independence. So it's basically not an increase, but rather different stages of life require different things that make up your Conatus, your well-being. So when we
it's an increase in capacity.
But it is not something so when I say what I want to impress here is that Conatus is not trying to add something more here, but rather knowing that we like being static, being in the same state is not your well-being. Growth,
it's a movement.
So growth is inbuilt in your Conatus. So it's not adding something more.
No. It's
but
not
rather
coming from
growth.
it's not something coming. You add it from outside. There are bits and pieces you add to the puzzle that you're making yourself. No, it's just about realizations, capacities, qualities that you can get.
Because growth is your is your Conatus. Being static is not Conatus. Because if you're not growing, so it's not like preserving yourself in, I have reached this ideal state and now I want to mummify myself, and this is not Conatus. Because we are growing, we are going through an impact.
Constant changes. So we are talking about a constant change.
Exactly. So change is inbuilt in Conatus. So we are not talking about reaching a perfect state and then like freeze. Stay here. No. So growth is inbuilt there. And then your Conatus is going to be like, about with that change, with that whatever is going around you, with that passage of time, you are also growing and preserving you. So not in the original state, but with that growth, you are preserving your essence, whatever it does mean. We can come to that.
That essence, that is human model, human nature, model of human being. So that model of human being is that moving and
Yeah.
changing and growing in that
Exactly.
sense. That is getting close to that model.
Yeah.
This is the model of conatus within the human being that has this movement, that motion toward growing
Yeah.
and changing and getting close to something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's where it's like not just physical preservation.
No.
It is way more than that, because we are not just because, as you remember, as human beings we are complex.
Yeah.
We are not just like a physical thing. It's not about just taking good care of my body, taking good care of my organs, and if we perfect that, we have kind of reached ideal conatus. No, that's not the thing.
Mm-hmm.
Conatus is much more complex than that, because we are much more complex human beings.
Yeah.
Physical preservation is part of it.
Yeah.
Unless my body is functioning properly, none of the other things.
I cannot even think. I cannot even learn.
Exactly.
If there is idea of desiring for learning more, doing mental activity more, intellectual activities more, you cannot do it unless you have a body to sustain yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Sustain this brain. You need this blood sugar, and you need your heart to pump. You need your body to sustain.
Exactly.
Sitting for hours and hours to read. It's all about this understanding that conatus happens in a unity of this body and mind.
Exactly.
You cannot just strive to through the one attribute and left the attribute aside. It's just it's not possible.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
there is a unity here.
Yeah, because
it's only one.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's where we are down at the idea of conatus. It's not just survival. It's this whole flourishing in a way.
Yes.
It's basically preserving your essence, striving to preserve your essence, whatever that may mean. We can come to that later, but preserving your being, preserving your existence, which is not mere survival, which is not mere physical being, because being human is something more than just having a healthy body.
So if you're talking about this essence of conatus, this human conatus, let's talk about human conatus.
Yeah, let's forget everything.
And it's really interesting, because when we gonna start by talking about emotions, somehow you sit by yourself and say, okay, this is only me then, because if it's the conatus, maybe everyone has it, maybe everything has it.
Yeah.
I don't know it.
Yeah.
So when we were talking about conatus and this movement and motion and this constant change, Spinoza called this constant change affect or emotion. This is what we call nowadays emotion. So this change, this moving and change, because when you move, you change.
Yeah.
When you're not here, you change your place, or even speciality, time, temporality, everything moves its place and moving time.
Yeah.
And because we are durational being,
this
means a change. This means I'm not in the past moment, I'm moving toward the future moment. This is a change of direction, change of the speciality and duration. So he calls that change of striving affect.
Yeah. It is. I think it's good to think about it in another way. How to approach it is like, for example, if my, the conatus is inbuilt in me, how does that it take shape? Like, what's going on? How do I determine in which direction to go? And that's where it's important to think about that I'm not living in an isolation, in kind of a safe, clear environment where I'm just striving to do things for my well-being. I'm living in a world populated by other human beings, other things, historical
because
facts.
My change is happening at the same time with others' changes.
So a lot of things are happening around me, and everything has an impact on me, because remember, I'm a body within this world, and so everything is happening to me, everything, so that the temperature of this room, your position sitting here, the position of the furniture, everything is impacting me. And when it does impact me, I receive it. It comes to me, and that's why it's affect. It's impacting me, and the definition that he uses for the affect, or not the definition, I think one of the places he says that, I think I have written it somewhere. Affect is something that increases or decreases in the body's power of
action. Exactly.
So basically so for example, if the table is sitting here, it is actually, I can't just go straight.
Yeah.
I either jump, I crawl underneath.
Yes.
So it is actually restricting.
It's in a dynamic relation with your power of acting.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So anything that happens in the world, the temperature outside, the kind of people around me, if it's nighttime, I see really shady people in the street, it does impact my capacity to act, or increases or decreases it.
Your power of action. Yes.
Exactly. So that's where, the whole idea that comes down to that, that's how affects work. And my conatus is basically, okay, this increases my power to act, this decreases my power to act. Basically, I go more towards what increases me, away from what decreases me. So that's where conatus...
That is how conatus works, actually.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's where we have the desire.
Yeah.
So I see this is increasing my power, my desire to go towards
it. And it's really interesting. You're talking about desire. It's not a thinking thing. It's not conscious in a way that I'm conscious of the temperature by checking.
Exactly.
It's not that. It's just, it's there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's there. It's immediate.
Exactly.
And it's like an auto thing. It's just happening by itself without me having any decision.
Exactly.
To either make it fast or even decrease the power of it, so or even restrain.
Yeah, it's not in my power.
No, it is not.
If the affect is coming to me and it either increases my power, my body reads it. It's increasing it, I desire it.
Yeah.
It decreases it, I desire to get away from it. I have an aversion towards it. So that's basically what affects do to us, and that's how our conatus plays a role.
Mm-hmm.
There's more of power to you, go for it.
Yeah.
Less power to it, get away from it. And that's how our conatus works within that picture. I hope we are painting a very simplistic picture of what conatus does and how it actually directs our choices, our actions, our desires by directing us that this is increasing your power, go towards it. This is not, go away from it.
So in this way, if I want to put it differently, affects are actually this change in my power of acting, in my bodily power of acting, and so we have some stuff that affect us, some affects, that I experience them as inhibitors of my power of action, and there are some affects that I experience them as promoters of my power of action. So in this way, we have some affects that we sense it as negative, and some affects we sense it as positive. So that positive and negative, it's all about my power of action.
Exactly.
Whatever I feel that enabled me to act, I sense it as positive. And whatever I sense it as inhibitor of my action, I sense it as negative. Am I right?
Yeah, I would say that's because he would say that there's nothing good or bad in nature. Nothing. Nature is totally neutral.
Yeah, it's value free.
Exactly. So this is not good, that is not bad. You cannot even say pleasure or joy is good as such, because pleasure or joy is nothing in its own. It's an event, a situation affecting me, and that gives me joy, that gives me pleasure, because I'm reading it that it would increase my power.
My power of action, exactly.
So, when I see, something that gives me happiness, it is giving me happiness because I see it as a positive thing. It's going to increase. So if I see my loved ones, their presence, them being around makes me feel secure, safe. It is actually making me feel able to work in the world better, have a support system, whatever the way you're interpreting. That's why it's a joyous thing. When I lose someone, it brings sorrow. Why? It's not that the thing is good or bad, but rather the death of that person, the loss
Mm-hmm.
of that person
Mm-hmm.
shows that I have
I'm
lost.
experiencing inhibition of
somehow
action.
I saw that person's presence as an important factor
Part
in my
of
well-being.
Yeah.
And now I see this person is not there.
Yeah.
And that kind of inhibits my power to act. And that's why, my body is reading that event as a negative thing. And that's why sorrow or pain is something that gives us, this is bad. And so that's why whenever we imagine this thing can give us sorrow, this thing can give us pain, we want to get away from it as far as we can, because we because we know that sorrow, melancholy, pain is actually going to decrease my power.
Yeah. So that's why we call it negative emotion.
Exactly.
It's not about they have the quality that we call it negative. No, it's about those are the affect that inhibits my power of action.
Yeah, exactly.
I think it's a very, very important concept here that we're talking about. And I quite like the idea that how he put it into the most, the simplest way and the most value-free way.
Yeah.
That because we're talking about negative emotions and positive emotions, and then in positive psychology, you're just trying to improve the positive.
Yeah, exactly.
But why? What is this? And another thing that when you were talking about this, even loss, melancholy, and everything, I was thinking about, oh my God, how deep is this going? The affect that I experience, it's so rooted deeply in that desire of protection.
Yeah.
Which I don't have any idea of that.
No,
I just feel it.
Exactly. It's not a conceptual thing.
But I don't know where's the root of it.
It's not like, this person cooks for me, cleans for me, now I have to do it.
It's not like
it's not a
practical.
It's not a practical mathematical calculation. It's your system telling you that this person, this thing, this situation increases your power, it increases your capacity to act. And now its absence means that your capacity to act is going to decrease.
And it's really interesting. That's why the psychoanalysts say that Freud's unconscious is really rooted in this concept.
Yeah.
That it is rooted somewhere that I don't know what it is. It's not conscious because it's not conscious. I just feel it.
Exactly.
Where's that coming from then?
Because we are impacted by things around us, and we are always interpreting things. Yeah. And these are getting embedded in our system without us.
We put
some effort, consciously analyze some things, and we understand some of that. But we are constantly hit by things, one thing after another. From when I will drive back to my home, on that way back, I will see so many things, go through so many things. Very few will register in my conscious, reflective mind. Yeah. The rest
but it's already impacting you.
The rest will go in my system.
Exactly. Yeah. Where it's stored, it's not lost.
Nothing is lost.
Nothing is lost. If everything has gone on.
You don't remember it, but it has an impact on your system.
And I think it's such a huge system of preservance. It's just everything preserves itself, which means that nothing is lost and disappeared. Yeah. Everything remains because it's supposed to remain. Yeah. This is complicated.
I mean, you remember that title, Body Remembers?
Yeah. But
body remembers.
It remembers.
Exactly. You don't remember, your body remembers everything.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So this kind of brings us to the idea that, okay, now we understand that we are ruled by the principle of conatus. Our own well-being or our own being is well-being. Let's get to that point.
Yes.
That my own being and my own well-being, that's the guiding principle. Anything that impacts me, my body actually, interprets it, understands it. That if it's increasing my power, I desire it. If it's decreasing my power, I go away from it. Simple, beautiful, elegant. Then why are we actually doing things that are not good for us?
Yes.
If my body is so intelligent, if my system is so intelligent, it has this inbuilt system of self-cleaning,
Yes.
self-preserving. It's the best kind of AI sort of a
Yes.
system
Yeah.
that interprets, this is coming, this is good for me, have more of it, that's bad for me, have less of it. Why are we going through these experiences where we see things that are actually so detrimental to us, but we are still doing it? You know, if the system that we have is so intelligent, then why are we often doing things that are so obviously bad for our own well-being, our own conatus? So has my conatus broken down? Has something wrong with my system?
At least we know that from Spinoza, which is this is impossible.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
If it's that one is impossible.
Exactly. So conatus is like, you know, for example, gravity.
Yeah. It cannot be broken.
Exactly. So something might block it.
Yes.
But if you're on Earth, there's gravity.
Yes.
You might try to block it, but it's there. You are a human being. You are part of this whole entire reality. You cannot be not working towards your own well-being. So that's impossible. But then we see a discrepancy.
Yeah.
How do we explain it? How do we explain self-harming behavior that is detrimental to your own self? How do we explain in a picture where conatus does work towards our own well-being?
Yeah, like even examples like eating disorder. You just don't
Which
eat.
is very easy, simple bodily.
Actually, you don't preserve yourself. You are actively harming yourself, and you know that this is harming yourself.
Exactly.
Or binge eating or anorexia is just about really obviously this is against preserving.
Exactly. Or even like the other side, emotional eating.
Yeah. Risk taking. It's just going into dangerous places. Seeking thrill, seeking or having risky behavior. You know that this will end up somewhere that is against exactly preserving the self, but you're going for it. Then what's wrong within the system? Is there anything wrong in the system? Actually, and it's really interesting because Spinoza, exactly the way that we put the example, set the example that why we do things that affect us in a negative way, in a way that actually inhibits conatus and inhibits our well-being.
It's not
this is
increasing
exactly
our
the way
power.
that he
exactly.
asked the question. For answering that, he introduced two affects or two models of affects, two different affects, active affects and passive affects. Are you going through passive and active?
Okay, so like affects by very nature, when you would say they are in a way you're affected. So there's a passivity.
Yes.
Definitely, like it's not something that you are creating on your own. You cannot start feeling, I want to feel joy. So I will just start creating joy within me.
Yeah.
No, it's not possible to feel that way because affects are always affects.
Yeah.
They're always coming from, in a way, outside. Not 100%, but to a great extent.
Yeah, mostly, yes. They're mostly
outside.
Coming from outside.
Yeah. So you are passive in receiving them. However, what Spinoza would say that, you can actually have a very good understanding of it. By understanding, he doesn't mean very rational understanding. It's not very, for example, we can give the example of jealousy. Yeah. For example, Hora gets a job I'm also applying for, and I feel jealousy. It's just eating me inside. And telling myself jealousy is a bad thing. Jealousy eats you inside. It would do nothing to my jealousy because
the feeling, the experience of jealousy.
Where is this jealousy coming from? I saw that position as increase in my power. Now I see another person getting it, which also means I don't get it. I don't get it, you get it, you increase your power, my power is not increased. So that's where
it's conflict
coming from. And so just because unless I see that this thing is the feeling of jealousy itself is decreasing my power, or whatever happened in this experience I need to shift focus, or whatever the shift needs to happen, it needs to be felt by my body, by my entire being, and not just intellectually. And what Spinoza would say, that when you understand your emotions, your passions, your affects, that where they are coming from, what is their purpose, where they should be leading you, when you develop that understanding, when you develop that kind of clarity, those passive affects become active. Because now you're not anymore played by it. Earlier I was just getting played by it. Yes, it is the way I would just hit this pen, you won't be able to see it, but it's just rolling on the table. If I am just acting like that, when the affects hit me, I just feel the emotions and then live my life through that kind of emotions and the way it's impacting me, then it is a passive affect or passive emotion. When I develop a proper understanding of where is it coming from, what is its purpose, and it's really important to remember what we mean by understanding. That's something we'll attend in our next session, where we talk about how to change that mode. But it is once I have that understanding, that where this affect wants to lead me, what's the purpose, how it links
Where's
to
it
my
coming from?
and
Where's
how
it coming from?
and how it links to my conatus, my well-being. The moment that shift happens, it becomes an active affect, because I'm no more a passive observer. I'm actually an active participant, not the creator. It's still an affect, but I'm an active participant here, and that what changes the shift from the passive affect to an active affect.
So when we are talking about self-destructive behaviors, we're talking about being passively impacted by affects outside me that inhibits my conatus. But I don't understand that they inhibits my conatus, and I'm passively affected by it. It's just exactly the way that you rolled a pen. I'm just being affected by it, and I moved in a way that wave wanted me to move. So I'm just totally abandoned myself to the hands of affect, and this affects these different ways of affected by the world. Different affects are the manners of being affected by the world. That what are the different affects? Yes, it's a shift in my being. It's very interesting. Affect is not the origin of the affect.
It's not.
It's not the movement of changes, the something that impacted me and moved me. It's not that. It's the situation that after move I am in. Imagine that you hit the pen, and pen stands or actually lands 3 centimeters after the way that you have pushed it. That after 3 centimeters is the affect. You actually arrive to a new destination, new situation. It's a new situation. That what brought you there, the impact from outside.
I think it's also like this is a good point. We can bring another idea from Spinoza, which is imagination, because affect is not actually someone dying. Affect is that person dying, and I see my life without that person. What kind of life I will have? This is my imagination. If this person is not in my life, this is how my life would look like. And that's the affect. Because now I know that my life is bleak, my life is dark, my life
I start living that, and that's affect.
And this is again not a conscious thing happening. Joy is when I see that, when I imagine all the good side of what my life would look like, what it looked like in the past. So basically, you are your system, when it is impacted by something, interpreted either as a good thing for your well-being, bad thing for your well-being, or a neutral thing for your well-being. And this interpretation kind of is in line with your conatus. it is trying to preserve it, but because it's a blind force,
Yeah.
it's coming from outside. That's why sometimes, and quite often, it does happen to us in some limited capacity and sometimes in more capacity. Something which is not actually good for our system is being interpreted by our body as good for our system because there's something going on. There are multiple reasons. So for example, I'm working looking at IFS these days, internal family system. They try to talk about parts of us, parts of self, and of different experiences. And they, for example, they're talking about this suicidal part of me.
Yeah.
Now that is totally detrimental to my well-being. Why does it exist within me? If I have a suicidal part, if someone has a suicidal part, it does not make sense from a Konata's point of
view. Yeah.
Because it's literally your end.
Yes.
Literally the end of your being.
It's a seize of exactly. It's a seize of Konatas, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, and Spinoza would never he would say. He would never make room for suicide in the system. I mean, we're not going there. I'm just trying to visit IFS point of view. But what they would say here is that suicidal part, if you let it speak, if you ask it, what's your fear? It would say, if I'm not there, this would happen. If, for example, if this person does not have suicidal thought, the kind of pain that unleashes will drag them mad. Now the preservation, the suicidal part, because of a lot of things that has happened, the preservation is basically in being suicidal, because if the pain is unleashed, we don't know. The unknown is like too dark. It's way darker than your own end. So that's why, compared to these two, my Konatas tells me suicidal is better than unleashing this pain. So basically, Konatas is still at work. However, because we are driven by, the reins are in the hand of these blind passions, these blind emotions, these which are generated from outside, and our system, based on our past experiences, based on what has happened, and with the help of imagination, is building a picture and taking a direction that it thinks, it interprets as best for our Konatas, which might not be. And so it is still in line with Konatas, but it is actually harming us in reality instead of preserving us. So it is still coming from the principle of Konatas, but in actual reality, it's harming us. So that's where, we understand these negative emotions. They are not bad. It's not that, they are trying to harm us. No, the origin is primarily from our own well-being. Our system is intelligent. It tries to preserve us. It tries to do what is best for us. However, due to it lacking the capacity to understand the entire picture, it is taking us in a very, very wrong direction, in a very, very harmful direction.
And I think when we are talking about active and passivity, when we are passively affected by the waves, you choose whatever it's in front of you. It's just...
It's not even a choice.
I think maybe not even choosing. It's about a direction that somebody else has decided for you.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole world is deciding for you because you were born in an alcoholic household.
Yeah.
Because you were born in a poverty. Because you experienced homelessness. Because you experienced domestic violence. These are affects. These are all the things that impacted one person's life. And all of a sudden you realize yourself, even with these disastrous impacts and all of these disastrous events, you have this desire, you have the Konatas. The Konatas is working. Otherwise you already given up. So the Konatas is doing something to preserve you, but because it's only answering the passive affects, might get a wrong direction that will not end up in preserving you. Because it's only passively, blindly. It's just, imagine that you are in a dark cave and you don't see any light. You don't see any light to see that, okay, if light comes up from somewhere, probably that is leading me outside of this cave. But you don't sit, because this darkness moves you. You just want to move on. You don't sit because the conatus is there. Conatus moves you forward. So you are go deep down to the cave, but it might end up totally away from the light.
Yeah,
but you're moving.
I was thinking more like, because you mentioned wave a couple of times, when you're a surfer, you don't change the waves.
Yeah.
Waves are coming. What do? You understand the waves.
Yeah.
You go understand the ups and downs.
Yeah.
And those very waves.
You attune yourself to those.
And those very waves give you the experience.
Exactly.
And you ride on the waves by your understanding their nature. And your board, you give a little bit direction to your board, but it's not you. Yeah. You are active participant there.
Yes.
And so that's what we, conatus is all, active passions are all about. You understand that, what are these waves, what are these affects, what they want to do, and you understand their direction, and you understand your own well-being, where it lies, and then you ride those waves
because you see the beach, you see the shore.
Exactly.
You see the shore, but at the same time you can see other rocks. The waves that broken on the rocks actually create waves as well, but you never actually try surfing on them, because you know that it will not end up to the shore. It will end up to the rocks, which is danger.
Exactly. And if you're just relying on the waves, you might go to the shore, or you might get smashed into the rocks.
Exactly.
But you're not. You are understanding the waves. You're not able to change the direction of the waves at all. Their intensity, nothing. But you're still able to ride.
You're just training yourself to get this skill of surfing.
Exactly. It's just ride the waves, understand the waves, and then be one with the waves. So I think that's what, how Spinoza would, or Spinoza's understanding of emotions would help us, that, the outside world will still keep on impacting us, and all the emotions that would emerge might still be, the way we understand them, negative and positive, but by making them active passions, by understanding them, and we will revisit the idea of what does understanding mean here in our next episode, because today is already quite jam-packed with a lot of ideas, but that would actually be, becoming an active participant in your own conatus. Instead of taking the reign of my conatus, I become an active participant. However, the emotions themselves, they are there for my self-preservation. You don't want to shut it down.
No.
There's no way that we want to say that I want to get rid of all the negative emotions. No, they are your barometers. They tell you, get away from this thing. As much as you want the so-called positive emotions, you also want the negative emotions, because they equally tell you this decreases your power. Like that one increases your power. So you need these internal intelligence system, but you don't want to be ridden by them or driven by them. You want to understand them and then become.
And I think it's really harnessing the power that they give you.
Exactly.
And I think the light that brings to your life and decision making. It's about really trying to lighten up and enlighten your understanding of what impacts you, and what that impacts, or how that impact can increase my conatus or can decrease my conatus. How it can help me to move toward within the path of well-being, how it can inhibit my movement toward well-being, and this movement of conatus. I think this way of understanding emotion, it's a very, very different attitude toward it. Would end up to a different attitude toward emotion, because then you don't classify it as negative and positive, bad or good, or even pleasurable, unpleasurable. It's about, some of them are actually painful are seen negative, or in phenomenology we call it, we say it has a negative valence, because it should push you to move away from it.
Exactly, it has a purpose, and you know, what I was going to say totally slipped my mind.
It's just about this power of moving you, or moving you away or forward to it.
Because what I was going to say was that reason or intellect doesn't have the power to move. It doesn't have the power to act. Desire to do something or not to do something is always coming from your emotions, from passions,
from affects.
Your intellect can weigh things and can help you see between different desires and prioritize things, but you know, it cannot drive you to do things. Drive to do things, drive to move, drive to act is always coming.
It's only affect. Affect drives. Actually, affect is the engine of movement.
Exactly. So we do not want to get rid of any emotion. We do not want to brand an emotion as a bad thing. Every emotion is important, is playing a hugely important role in our life. So we don't want to silence it. We don't want to give you medications that keep you happy all the time.
Numb it down.
It might be a solution for the time being if someone is going through something, but we want our system to tell us this is bad, this is dangerous, this is really harmful. That's your way of navigating the world. If you lose it, you would be crippled. You would not work towards your well-being. So I think that's a good point to bring back this episode and end it on this note, that we don't think that negative emotions are actually negative in any way.
In that sense,
they are painful. I remember one psychologist called them uncomfortable.
Yes.
They
make you uncomfortable. Actually, it's the purpose of it.
Exactly. If you're very comfortable with pain, you know, you would not learn to get away from things that cause you pain.
Exactly.
So so it is important. However, at times we find that, you know, they are actually harming us. Emotions are not guiding us in the right way. The barometer seems to be broken. It's not preserving our conatus. And the question is, how do we fix it? If it's something that is not intellectual activity, if we are affected from outside, affects are coming from outside, how do we actually turn these passive affects into active affects? What are the ways of making me the kind of origin of these affects in an active way, and how would that look like in our lives, and what sort of path our lives will take if we are able to achieve that?
How we can
and to what extent?
Surfing.
Exactly.
How we can be
surf our own
best
lives.
surfers. The best surfers that one can be in our life, because it's all about surfing those wave of emotions.
Yes, I think that's a good point to bring this session to end, and in the next session we will
talk about healing and well-being, and how we can really changing passive affects to active affects. Thank you so much for Sameema, for bringing Spinoza to the session. I mean, it's every time that I start reading Spinoza, I'm like, oh my god, this is hilarious. It's just amazing.
Wonderful.
It's just, you feel so passionate about the ways that he put everything so simple but so clear and solid and foundational. And that you can work with it. It's still, you know,
it still makes so much
after
sense.
400 years is still working perfectly fine.
Exactly.
The whole idea.
Definitely.
Okay, thank you so much.
Thanks,
and we will
Hora.
talk later again about passions, active and passive. Take care, everyone.
Goodbye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.